Billionaire finds his maid's daughter hiding to eat leftovers. His reaction will shock you. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Imagine a world where every day is a reminder of how different life can be depending on which side of the wealth divide you stand on. In this story, that divide couldn't be clearer. The mansion stood tall on the hill, its glass windows gleaming in the sunlight, offering a view of the sprawling city below. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers and polished wood, and the aroma of gourmet meals wafted through the air, promising a life of luxury. This was the world of James Harrison, a self-made billionaire who had everything he could ever want. He had the mansion, the cars, the wealth, the status, everything, except peace. James had spent his life working relentlessly to build an empire. But like so many people who reached the top, there was a growing emptiness that he couldn't shake. What he didn't know was that the answer to his discontent had been hiding in plain sight for years. Enter Chloe, the 10-year-old daughter of his housekeeper, Abigail. Chloe had lived in the mansion for as long as she could remember, though she was often invisible to James. Her mother, Abigail, worked tirelessly, keeping the massive home spotless, while Chloe was left to quietly pass the hours in corners, out of sight, eating what little food she could find. Her life was one of constant struggle, but she never complained. Chloe had learned early on to stay out of the way, to be quiet, and to avoid drawing attention to herself. She had grown used to the lavish meals the family enjoyed, yet she never tasted them herself. Instead, she would sneak into the kitchen at night, when no one was looking, and eat the leftovers. Leftovers, that's what Chloe had come to call dinner. She would eat scraps from the plates that had been discarded, and sometimes it was all she had for days. But she didn't mind. In her world, this was normal. She had never known any different. One evening, as the family gathered for a lavish dinner, James walked into the kitchen to grab something before returning to his office. As he passed by the corner of the room, he stopped in his tracks. There, in the shadows, he saw Chloe. She was sitting on the cold kitchen floor, holding a small bowl with scraps of food, her thin hands clutching the dish as if it were a treasure. Her eyes were downcast, her shoulders hunched. She looked up, startled, but immediately lowered her gaze again, as if she were trying to disappear. James stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. His mind raced as he processed what he was seeing. His housekeeper's daughter, the child who had been in his home for years, was eating leftover scraps while the rest of the family dined on gourmet meals just down the hall. The sight shook him to his core. He had always prided himself on his wealth, on how much he had achieved. Yet, here was this young girl, living in the same house, eating what was left over after the family had eaten. He couldn't fathom why he had never noticed before. But now, in that moment, it was all too clear. Chloe was a symbol of everything he had overlooked. The people who worked behind the scenes to keep his life running smoothly, the ones who had nothing but their dignity left. What happened next would change James' perspective forever. He stepped closer to Chloe, his voice softer than usual, filled with a mixture of concern and guilt. "Why are you eating this?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Chloe looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. She didn't expect him to speak to her, let alone ask such a question. "My mom says it's okay," Chloe replied quietly, looking away. James felt a lump form in his throat. It wasn't okay. He had never once considered the struggle his staff faced, the hardship they endured just to make sure his family's needs were met. But now, looking at Chloe, he understood. It wasn't just about the food, it was about everything. The life he had taken for granted, the luxury he had been surrounded by, was built on the backs of people like Chloe and her mother. As James stood there, staring at the small, fragile figure in front of him, something inside him shifted. This moment was the turning point, the moment that would make him realize that wealth wasn't just about money, but about the people who make it possible. As James stared at Chloe, sitting on the cold kitchen floor with her bowl of leftovers, he was flooded with emotions that were both foreign and overwhelming. He had always believed that wealth was the ultimate measure of success. But now, standing before this little girl, he realized how hollow that belief had become. Chloe, with her thin frame and sad eyes, was a stark contrast to the lavish world he inhabited. She was a silent reminder of everything he had overlooked, the people who made his life possible, but who were never seen, never acknowledged. He had never truly seen her before. He had never asked what life was like for those who worked in his home, who made sure his food was prepared, his home was clean, and his life was as seamless as it appeared to the outside world. Now, with a simple glance, he understood the immense gulf between his life and hers. Chloe had never asked for much. She had never complained. In fact, she had spent most of her days trying to remain invisible, just as her mother had instructed her. But now, with James standing there in the kitchen, she felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in her life, someone was looking at her. "You shouldn't have to live like this," James said, his voice low and filled with regret. Chloe looked up at him, her eyes wide with confusion. She didn't understand what he meant. She had grown up in this mansion, surrounded by wealth and privilege, but she had never been part of that world. Her world was made up of the small, unnoticed corners of the house, the spaces where the staff worked, and where she could quietly eat whatever scraps were left behind. "I'm fine," Chloe said quietly, as if trying to convince herself as much as James. "My mom says it's okay." James felt a pang of guilt. He realized how much he had taken for granted, how much he had never questioned. He had always assumed that everything in his life was perfect, but standing there in the kitchen, staring at Chloe, he knew that was not the case. "It's not okay," James replied, his voice firm this time. "No one should have to eat leftovers just to survive. You deserve more than this." Chloe blinked, surprised by his words. She wasn't used to anyone caring, let alone a billionaire like James. "I'm just doing what I can," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mom works hard to take care of us. She doesn't have time to cook fancy meals." James felt his heart sink. He had always admired his own success, believing that his hard work was the reason for his wealth. But now, he couldn't help but feel that he had missed the point entirely. His success had come at the expense of people like Chloe and her mother. They had worked tirelessly behind the scenes, unnoticed, while he lived his life of luxury. He had never once stopped to think about the struggles they faced every day. As James looked at Chloe, sitting on the kitchen floor, eating the scraps from his dinner table, something inside him shifted. He couldn't change the past, but he could change the future. And that change had to start with him. "From now on, things are going to be different," James said, his voice filled with resolve. "I'm going to make sure you and your mom are treated with the respect you deserve. No one should ever have to go hungry, and no one should ever have to feel invisible in their own home." Chloe stared at him, unsure if she had heard him right. Was he really saying what she thought he was saying? "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But you don't have to." James knelt down beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I do have to," he said, his voice gentle. "Because I've realized something. I've spent so much time focusing on my own success that I've forgotten about the people who helped me succeed. You and your mother deserve to be treated with kindness and dignity. I promise I will do better." Chloe smiled, the first real smile she had ever given him. It was small, but it was enough to make James feel like he had finally found the missing piece of his life. As he stood up, he made a silent vow to himself. He would make things right, not just for Chloe and her mother, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked, underappreciated, and taken for granted. James knew the road ahead would be long, but this was the first step toward a future where kindness, respect, and humanity would guide his actions. As the days went by, James kept his promise. He made sure Chloe and her mother, Abigail, were treated with the respect they deserved. No longer were they invisible figures behind the scenes, working tirelessly while being overlooked by the people they served. James had made a commitment to change, and he was determined to follow through. It wasn't an easy journey. His business empire required constant attention, but James found himself thinking more and more about the lives of the people who worked for him. Chloe's quiet smile lingered in his mind, reminding him of the responsibilities he had neglected for so long. He could no longer ignore the deep divide between the world he lived in and the world Chloe and her mother navigated every day. One afternoon, after an important meeting, James called Chloe to his office. She stood hesitantly in the doorway, unsure of what to expect. James smiled warmly and motioned for her to come in. "Chloe, I've been thinking," he began. about how you and your mom have been living. And I want to do something to make sure you both have the opportunity you deserve." Chloe's heart raced. She had never been asked to sit in James's office before. In fact, she had never been invited into his personal space. She stepped forward, unsure of what this new development meant. "What do you mean, sir?" she asked, her voice quiet. James looked at her with sincerity. "I want to make sure you and Abigail have the chance to live a better life. I want you to have access to education, healthcare, and everything else you need to thrive. You've been working hard for me for so long, and it's time I gave something back." Chloe blinked, trying to process what he was saying. She had never considered a future outside of cleaning the mansion or helping her mother with chores. She had never dared to dream of a life where she could go to school, where she could learn and grow beyond the walls of the mansion. "But I don't know if we can accept that," Chloe said, looking down at the floor. "We've always managed just fine." James leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to manage on your own anymore. You have the right to live a better life, Chloe. You and your mother deserve more than just surviving. I want to help you thrive." The weight of his words settled on Chloe's shoulders, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she could breathe. It was as though a heavy burden had been lifted, and the world suddenly seemed full of possibility. James continued, "I've arranged for you to attend school, and I've made sure Abigail has access to the health care she needs. From now on, you won't have to go without, and you won't have to hide in the shadows anymore. You're a part of this family now, Chloe. You deserve everything that comes with it." Chloe didn't know what to say. She had never imagined a life like this, where she was seen, where she was valued. She had spent so long blending into the background that she didn't know how to accept this new reality. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving us a chance." James smiled warmly, his heart swelling with pride. "You've always had a chance, Chloe. You just needed someone to see it." In the days that followed, Chloe and Abigail's lives began to change in ways they had never imagined. Chloe started attending school, where she quickly discovered a love for learning that she never knew she had. She excelled in her studies and made friends, something she had never been able to do before. Abigail, too, was able to take care of her health, something she had neglected for years. James checked in regularly, making sure they had everything they needed and more. He became not just a boss, but a mentor, guiding Chloe through this new chapter in her life. Chloe had always dreamed of a better life, but she never thought it was possible. Now, thanks to James, her dreams were no longer out of reach. As the months passed, Chloe blossomed into a confident young girl, no longer hiding in the shadows. She began to see herself as someone worthy of success, someone who deserved to be treated with kindness and respect. And James? He found himself forever changed. The guilt he had felt in that kitchen months earlier faded, replaced by a sense of purpose. He had learned that true wealth wasn't just about the money in his bank account. It was about the people in his life and the way he treated them. Chloe and her mother had shown him that success wasn't something to be measured in figures on a spreadsheet. It was something deeper, something that came from kindness, compassion, and the ability to make a difference in someone else's life. And for the first time, James felt truly wealthy. As the months went by, Chloe and Abigail's lives continued to improve. The changes James had promised them became a reality, but what neither of them expected was how much they would change James as well. He was no longer just the distant billionaire who had made his money by sheer force of will. Now, he was a man with a new understanding of what truly mattered in life. Chloe excelled in school. She quickly became known for her intelligence and determination. Her teachers were impressed by her natural ability to grasp complex concepts, and her classmates admired her kindness and humility. She had gone from a quiet, unnoticed girl to someone who was thriving in a world of opportunity. James was proud of her, though he never expressed it in a way that made her uncomfortable. He was careful to respect her boundaries, always reminding her that the chance to learn and grow was hers to take, not something he was giving to her. But the truth was, Chloe had changed. She no longer saw herself as invisible. She understood that her worth wasn't determined by the circumstances of her birth or her social status. She had value, not because of her wealth, but because of her intelligence, kindness, and potential. Abigail, too, was thriving. With access to better health care, her health improved dramatically. She no longer struggled to keep up with the demands of her job, and for the first time in years, She could focus on taking care of herself. She had been so focused on providing for Chloe that she had neglected her own well-being. But now, thanks to James's generosity, she had time to rest and recover. She began to spend more time with Chloe, and their bond grew even stronger. One evening, after a long day at work, Abigail and Chloe sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. Chloe had just returned from a school event where she had won an award for academic excellence. She was excited, but there was something else on her mind. "Mom," Chloe said, her voice thoughtful, "I've been thinking a lot about James. I know we've been getting so much help from him, but sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough to show him how much I appreciate it." Abigail smiled warmly, her eyes filled with pride. "You don't have to do anything, sweetheart. James has done more for us than we could ever ask for. Just being yourself is enough. He sees you for who you are, and that's all that matters." Chloe looked out at the horizon, taking in the beautiful view. She had never imagined a life like this. Just a few months ago, she had been a quiet, invisible girl in the corner of a grand mansion, hiding from the world. Now, she was someone who had a future full of possibilities. Meanwhile, James was busy with his work, but his thoughts often wandered back to Chloe and Abigail. He had learned so much from them. They had shown him that the true value of life wasn't in how much money you could make or how many deals you could close. The true value of life lay in the relationships you formed, in the people you helped, and in the kindness you showed. James's success no longer felt as empty as it once had. He had discovered that real wealth was not measured in dollars and cents, but in the ability to make a difference in someone else's life. Chloe had helped him see that. One day, as James sat in his office, reflecting on how far they had come, he received a phone call from Abigail. She had something important to tell him. "James, I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done for us. You've changed our lives in ways I never thought possible. Chloe's doing so well at school, and I'm feeling better than I have in years. We're both so grateful for everything." James smiled as he listened to her words. "I'm glad to hear that, Abigail. But it's Chloe who's made all the difference. She's the one who's shown me what really matters in life." Abigail laughed softly. "I think you've both changed each other. You've both given each other something that can't be measured in money or success. You've given each other hope." As James hung up the phone, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He knew that the road ahead wasn't always going to be easy, but he was no longer walking it alone. Chloe and Abigail had taught him the true meaning of success, and for that, he would be forever grateful. Months passed, and Chloe's transformation became more evident every day. She had truly embraced the opportunities that James had given her, excelling in her studies and developing a new sense of confidence. No longer the quiet girl in the background, she was now a leader among her peers, respected for her intelligence and kindness. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. Abigail, too, was flourishing. With her health improving and the financial pressure lifted, she was able to focus on the things she had long neglected. She found herself more present in Chloe's life, and the bond between them grew even stronger. But despite all the positive changes in their lives, there was still something missing. For James, the transformation had been profound. He had been so focused on wealth and success that he had never truly considered what it meant to live a fulfilling life. Chloe had opened his eyes to what really mattered: human connection, empathy, and kindness. He had spent so many years measuring his worth by the size of his empire, but now, he understood that real wealth was not measured in dollars and cents. It was measured in the impact you had on others. One day, James invited Chloe and Abigail to dinner at his mansion. He wanted to do something special for them, something to show them just how much they had meant to him. As they sat down to the table, James looked at them both, a smile spreading across his face. "I've been thinking," he said, "about everything that has happened over the past few months. I've learned more from you too than I could have ever imagined. You've taught me that success isn't just about business deals and profits. It's about the people you help, the lives you touch, and the difference you make." Chloe and Abigail exchanged a glance, both moved by his words. Chloe, who had once been invisible, now found herself at the center of this conversation, a place she never thought she would occupy. "I never thought I would be in a position like this," she said softly. "I used to just try to survive, but now I feel like I can actually live. I feel like I have a future." Abigail smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "We owe everything to you, James," she said. You've given us a chance at a better life. We will never be able to repay you for what you've done." James shook his head. "You don't have to repay me. All I ask is that you continue to live the life you deserve. Both of you have so much potential, and I want to be here to help you reach it." The dinner went on, filled with laughter and meaningful conversation, and for the first time in a long time, James felt at peace. He had done something good. He had made a real difference in the lives of the people who mattered most. But the story didn't end there. As Chloe grew older, she went on to attend college, earning a full scholarship for her exceptional academic performance. Abigail, too, found new opportunities to further her career and improve her quality of life. James, ever the mentor, supported both of them every step of the way, but he also watched with pride as they began to forge their own paths. Chloe, once the girl eating leftovers in the shadows, was now a young woman with the world at her feet. And Abigail, who had once struggled to provide for her daughter, was now a confident woman who had reclaimed her life. For James, the greatest reward was not the success of his business or the accolades that came with it. The greatest reward was seeing Chloe and Abigail succeed, knowing that his actions had played a part in their journey. They were no longer just employees or people in his service, they were his family. As the years passed, James continued to reflect on the lessons Chloe and Abigail had taught him. He had come to understand that wealth was not about hoarding riches, but about sharing them. Not just with those who were rich like him, but with everyone who could benefit from a little kindness. He knew now that the most important thing he could do with his wealth was to use it to make a difference. And as for Chloe and Abigail, they had not only changed their own lives, they had changed James's life as well. They had shown him that true success was not about what you accumulated, but about what you gave away. As the years passed, Chloe's growth and success became a testament to the power of opportunity and compassion. She graduated college with honors, and soon after, she landed a prestigious internship with one of the top law firms in the country. It was a dream come true, and she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come, from the little girl who once ate scraps in the kitchen to a young woman with a bright future ahead. Abigail, too, had found fulfillment. After years of sacrificing her own well-being for Chloe, she was finally able to enjoy a sense of peace and stability. She had worked her way up in the household management industry, eventually starting her own business that provided consulting services for high-end estates. She was proud of how far she had come and knew that none of it would have been possible without James's help. Yet, as fulfilling as their new lives were, both Chloe and Abigail knew that they couldn't forget the journey that had brought them here. They were determined to give back, to help others who had been in the same position they had once been in. They had both seen firsthand the difference a little kindness and opportunity could make, and they wanted to spread that message to others. James, too, had changed over the years. He had transformed from a man focused solely on his wealth to someone who valued relationships and impact more than financial success. He had made it his mission to support and empower those who had been overlooked or marginalized, just as Chloe and Abigail had once been. He continued to work alongside them, investing in causes that helped others achieve their dreams, just as they had. One afternoon, as James sat in his office, looking out over the city skyline, he received a call from Chloe. "James," she said, her voice filled with excitement, "I'm ready. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I want to do something that will make a difference. I want to start a nonprofit that helps underprivileged children get the education they deserve. I want to give them the same opportunities that I had, the opportunities you gave me." James smiled as he listened to her words. It was exactly what he had hoped for Chloe to take her success and pay it forward, to help others the way she had been helped. "I'm so proud of you, Chloe," he said. "You're going to do amazing things. And I'll be right here, supporting you every step of the way." That conversation marked the beginning of a new chapter. Chloe's nonprofit quickly gained traction, and with the help of James and Abigail, they were able to provide scholarships, mentorship programs, and resources to countless children who otherwise would have never had the chance to succeed. As for Abigail, she joined Chloe's organization as the operations manager, bringing her wealth of experience in household management and organization to the nonprofit's day-to-day operations. Together, they formed an unstoppable team, dedicated to changing the lives of children who were, like Chloe once was, living in the shadows of others. Over time, the nonprofit expanded, providing not just educational support, but also access to healthcare, job training, and social services. The impact they made was felt in communities across the country, as more and more children found their voices, their confidence, and their future. James watched all of this unfold with a heart full of pride. The change he had helped bring into their lives had come full circle. Chloe, Abigail, and even James himself had found purpose in helping others, and it had brought them all closer together. It wasn't just about the money or the success anymore. It was about the legacy they were building, a legacy of compassion, empowerment, and transformation. As the years passed, James often found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned. The most important one, he realized, was that true wealth was not found in what you owned or how much you had. It was found in what you gave to others, to your community, and to the world. And in that, James had found his richest reward. Years had passed since James, Chloe, and Abigail had embarked on this remarkable journey together, and now, their lives were intertwined in ways none of them had imagined. What began as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into something far greater, a movement that changed the lives of countless children across the country. Chloe's nonprofit had become a powerful force for good, providing underprivileged children with the opportunities they deserved. The programs they offered gave kids access to education, mentorship, healthcare, and job training, ensuring that they had the tools to succeed in life. James, who had once seen wealth as the pinnacle of success, now saw it as a means to an end, a tool to help others. He had become more involved in the nonprofit's work, not just financially, but personally. He visited schools, attended fundraising events, and even spoke at conferences, sharing his story and encouraging others to get involved. His transformation from a businessman driven solely by profit to a philanthropist dedicated to making a difference had been profound. But it was not just the children who had been impacted by this work. Abigail, who had once felt invisible in James's world, had found her true calling. She had taken on a leadership role within the nonprofit, helping to manage the operations and ensure that everything ran smoothly. Her expertise in household management had translated perfectly into the world of nonprofit work, and she had become a key figure in the organization's success. Her growth mirrored the changes Chloe had gone through. The quiet woman who had once worked tirelessly in the background was now a powerful voice for change, helping to guide the nonprofit and ensure that it continued to thrive. Chloe, too, had found fulfillment in her work. As the founder of the nonprofit, she had spent years building it from the ground up, and now, she was recognized as a leader in the nonprofit sector. She was invited to speak at conferences, share her story, and inspire others to make a difference. But despite all the accolades and recognition, Chloe never lost sight of why she started this journey in the first place, to help children like her. One day, as Chloe walked into the nonprofit's headquarters, she was greeted by the familiar faces of the children she had helped over the years. Some were now in high school, others had graduated and gone on to college, and a few had even landed their first jobs. Chloe smiled as she looked around. It was moments like these that reminded her of the profound impact they were having. The world she once knew, where she was invisible, was now a distant memory. Chloe was no longer the quiet girl hiding in the shadows. She was a young woman making waves in the world, someone who had turned her struggles into strength. As she sat down in her office, she reflected on how far they had all come. James had once been a man who measured success by his bank balance. Now, he measured it by the lives he had touched and the difference he had made. Abigail had gone from being a housekeeper to a powerful force in the nonprofit world. And Chloe, who had once only dreamed of a better life, was now living that life and helping others do the same. Chloe's phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a message from James. "Chloe, I'm so proud of you. I always knew you were capable of amazing things. But seeing you change the lives of so many children, it's truly incredible. You've built something that will last for generations. Keep doing what you're doing." Chloe smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you," she replied. "But none of this would be possible without you. You gave me the opportunity to believe in myself, and now I'm giving that belief to others." As she put down her phone, Chloe felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had achieved something beyond her wildest dreams. She had built a legacy, not one of wealth, but one of impact. James's wealth had given her the tools to succeed, but it was the work they had all done together that had created something truly meaningful. And as she looked out the window at the busy city below, Chloe knew that their work was far from over. There were still so many children who needed help, so many lives to change. But as long as they kept fighting for what was right, they would continue to make a difference, one life at a time. As Chloe's nonprofit continued to grow, so did her sense of purpose. She had always dreamed of changing the world, but now, it was a reality. The impact of her work was clear. The lives of countless children were being transformed, and they were not just surviving but thriving, much like she had. With every new program, every new partnership, and every new child who found hope through the work they did, Chloe realized that her mission was far from over. But as the nonprofit expanded, the challenges grew. It was no longer just about helping a few kids in need. Now, Chloe was faced with the responsibility of leading a national organization, one that required constant attention and strategic planning. The weight of this responsibility wasn't lost on her, but she was determined to succeed, knowing how much was at stake. Abigail, too, found herself increasingly involved in the day-to-day operations of the nonprofit. Her expertise in managing the household had translated seamlessly into running an organization. She was a crucial part of the team, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. The two of them, Chloe and Abigail, had become an unstoppable force, working tirelessly together to turn their vision into a reality. But even with all their success, they had never forgotten the roots of their journey. They remembered the struggles, the sacrifices, and the moments when they felt invisible. It was those moments that kept them grounded and motivated to keep pushing forward. One evening, as Chloe sat at her desk reviewing plans for the next big fundraising event, she received a call from James. "Chloe, I was just thinking about how far we've come. What you've done with this nonprofit, it's incredible. You've created something that will last long after we're gone. I'm so proud of you." Chloe smiled at his words, but she knew that their work wasn't done yet. "Thank you, James. But this is just the beginning. There's still so much more to do. So many more children to help." James chuckled softly. "I know, but I think you've built something special here. You've shown that anyone, no matter their background, can achieve greatness. You've created a legacy of kindness and opportunity." Chloe's heart swelled with gratitude. She knew how much James's support had meant to her, how much he had shaped her journey. He had given her a chance when she had none, and now she was doing the same for others. But as the nonprofit continued to grow, Chloe began to wonder if they were truly doing enough. The world was vast, and the challenges were endless. Every day, she was reminded of the countless children who still lacked access to education, healthcare, and basic opportunities. They had made incredible strides, but there was still so much work to be done. One morning, as she walked into the office, Chloe gathered her team together for a meeting. "We've accomplished so much, but I know we can do more," she said, her voice full of determination. "Our mission has always been to help children in need, but we need to reach more. We need to build partnerships with other organizations, expand our programs, and create lasting change in communities that have been left behind." The room fell silent for a moment, but then her team erupted into applause, inspired by her passion and vision. They were all committed to the cause, and together, they would do whatever it took to make a difference. Over the following months, Chloe and her team worked tirelessly to expand the nonprofit's reach. They formed new partnerships with schools, businesses, and community organizations. They launched initiatives focused on mental health, providing support for children who had been affected by trauma and poverty. They raised funds to build community centers where children could not only learn but also grow, find mentors, and heal. The impact was immediate. Children who had once been overlooked were now given the chance to succeed. They had access to education, resources, and the emotional support they needed to thrive. Chloe saw firsthand the difference they were making. She saw children who had once felt hopeless now dreaming of their future. It was in these moments that Chloe realized the true power of what they were doing. It wasn't just about providing a service. It was about giving children the belief that they could change their own lives, that they were worthy of success, and that they had the power to break the cycle of poverty. As the nonprofit continued to grow, Chloe felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had achieved everything she had set out to do, but she knew the work would never be finished. There would always be more children to help, more communities to reach, and more lives to change. But she was no longer afraid. She had built something that would endure, something that would continue to empower the next generation of children. And for Chloe, that was the greatest reward of all. As Chloe stood on the stage, looking out at the audience of supporters, volunteers, and community leaders, she felt a profound sense of gratitude and fulfillment. The nonprofit she had built with so much dedication had now become a powerful force, impacting countless lives across the country. She had come a long way from the shy girl hiding in the corners of the mansion, eating leftovers while others dined in luxury. She had transformed her own life and, in doing so, had transformed the lives of many others. But as the applause echoed in the room, Chloe knew that the journey was far from over. There were still so many children to reach, so many lives to touch, and so much work left to do. The work of changing the world, of lifting people out of poverty and giving them the opportunities they deserved, would never be complete. Yet, Chloe was no longer afraid of the enormity of the task. She had seen firsthand the difference that kindness, opportunity, and belief in people could make. She had experienced it in her own life, and now, she was witnessing it in the lives of others. James, who had once been consumed by wealth and success, stood beside her on the stage, his pride evident as he watched her speak. It had been his initial support, his belief in her potential, that had given her the foundation to build this organization. But it was her drive, her compassion, and her unwavering commitment to making a difference that had turned the vision into reality. Abigail, too, stood proudly in the crowd, watching her daughter speak with the confidence and grace that she had always known was inside her. Abigail had witnessed Chloe's journey from the very beginning, and as her mother, she couldn't have been prouder of what her daughter had achieved. The legacy of kindness and empowerment they had all built together was more than just a nonprofit. It was a movement, one that had sparked change and touched the hearts of people everywhere. As Chloe finished her speech and the applause died down, she felt a tap on her shoulder. It was James, who smiled at her with warmth in his eyes. "You did it," he said. "You've built something that will last. You've made a difference in the world, Chloe." Chloe smiled back, her heart full. "We've all made a difference," she replied. "And we're just getting started." That evening, as Chloe, Abigail, and James sat together at dinner, they reflected on how far they had come. Chloe had not only built a nonprofit that had transformed lives, but she had also built a family that had been forged through struggle, sacrifice, and love. James, who had once thought of wealth as the ultimate goal, now understood that the true measure of success was not in the balance of his bank account, but in the relationships he had built, the lives he had touched, and the difference he had made. Abigail, who had always lived in the shadows, had now found her place in the light. She was no longer just a housekeeper or an employee. She was a leader, a mentor, and a driving force behind the nonprofit's success. The future looked brighter than ever. Chloe knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready for them. With the support of James and Abigail, and with the strength and determination she had found within herself, there was no obstacle they couldn't overcome. As they sat around the table, laughing and sharing stories, Chloe realized that the true reward of all their hard work was not the success of the nonprofit, but the relationships they had built along the way. They had created something lasting, something meaningful, something that would continue to change lives for generations to come. And for Chloe, that was the greatest gift of all.